I get asked about the topic of podcasts quite a bit, mostly from my YouTube viewers, and many of them will say, oh man, I love this content. Could you put this into a podcast? Or why don't you have a podcast already? I'd like to have these as downloadable MP3s so I don't have to keep streaming your content using a bandwidth. And the answer is, I actually do have a podcast. It's called Sadler's Lectures for the time being. I may change the name later, but that's basically what it is. I started it back in May of 2018, and I've been putting out content and regularly posting about it in my social media, that is in my Twitter stream, in my Facebook page, and in LinkedIn, really since that time. And when I first started out, I was maybe doing 10 episodes a month. Now I'm up to releasing podcast episodes almost daily. So there's over 350 tracks at this point in time, a lot of content. And so I'd invite you. The link is right below in the video description. If you're interested in my podcast, but you haven't already found out about it or listened to it, just go right there on SoundCloud. You can also find it in a variety of other formats and platforms like Apple Music and whatever Google Play is now, and a bunch of other things. I've even found by doing searches that the podcast is aggregated in places that I've never even heard of. So it's out there. You just got to look for it. But again, you can go straight to SoundCloud and find it there if that's what you want to do. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the podcast, what I'm doing at present, and what I'd really like to do in the future. And you might want to support that. I'll talk more about that at the end. So Sadler's Lectures, I started taking some of my philosophical core concept videos, and I've got probably about 800 of them now. And I would take the video file, turn it into a sound file. The ones that I've shot more recently where I'm using this voice recorder, I just use the voice recorder file. That makes it a lot more useful. And then I try to improve the sound as best as I can. In some cases, there's not that much that you can do with it. In other cases, there's quite a lot. I'm using Audacity, which I'm comfortable with. I don't want to try to, invest in some really high-end digital editing software because that's not my shtick, right? And then I take out all of the ums and ahs and places where I say a word twice and long pauses and sounds of me writing on the blackboard. At least I try to get all that stuff out of there. And then I, tack on a little intro and a little outro, and there you got a podcast episode. So I have been doing that. Actually, I had my daughter helping me out with that at first, but she wasn't really that into doing it. So I've been doing it myself since 2018, and I've put out quite a few. I put together a list of the different thinkers, and this may not include all of them, but the episodes that are available now include Heraclitus, Parmenides, Plato, Aristotle, Epicurus, Cicero, Seneca, Epictetus, Augustine, Anselm, Descartes, Pascal, Hume, Bentham, Kant, Hegel, Mill, Kierkegaard, Dostoevsky, Nietzsche, Marcel, Sartre, Beauvoir, Camus, James, Rilke, Ayer, Rawls, Kohlberg, Singer, Arendt, and I think I probably left some people off of that as well. And I've also got a few talks that I gave here and there. One comes to mind, the talk that I gave at the Marquette Aristotle Conference about thumos and its history. That's that spirited part of the soul. I recorded that as I was giving it, and I converted it into a podcast episode, and I'll probably do that with others in the future. So if you go to the podcast and you kind of just look around, you're going to find lectures anywhere from 8 minutes at the shortest to 30 minutes at the longest on all of these different thinkers and some of their key works. It is the same content basically as you're going to find in core concept videos. So, nothing absolutely new there, but people find them very, very helpful. And I use this content in my online classes. I provide it as a resource to students so they can download it, have it on their phone. They go to the gym, they take a walk, they're driving, working out, whatever. They can listen to me talking about, Rene Descartes and what's going on in the Meditations, or, about Cicero and his different views on the Stoics or the Epicureans, or whatever it happens to be. It's totally up to them. So I use these as resources for my own students. I also provide them to my clients. I have a lot of individual clients, and if they're interested in something, I shoot those podcast episodes to them. I say, here, check these resources out, right? But the general public seems to be quite interested in them and find them useful as well. I think that just a lot of people don't know about them. They know about me more for the YouTube videos and perhaps less for the podcast episodes. I did go through and take a look at the stats, and I was pleasantly surprised to find out that all told, since the inception, I've had about 140,000 listens to these, and I'm sure that's counting ones that are coming through other formats and platforms as well. But just in the last year, in 2020, we had over 100,000 plays of this podcast content, which is really gratifying. And in December was a really bumper month. We had over 14,000. So it's getting some traction. I do want to thank one particular Twitter, user who generates a lot of cool stuff, and that's True Sci-Fi. That's Kelly Truelove, and the putting the lists together and having the featuring in the channel, that's been really helpful, I imagine, in spreading the word. But I do want to get the word out there a little bit more, which is why I'm shooting this video. The last thing that I would like to talk about is, people say, okay, so you've got a podcast, you're doing these Sadler's lectures, that's really nice. I can get this content elsewhere. It's not really original content because it's your YouTube videos. Granted, it's better quality and they're a little bit shorter to listen to because you took out all of your knows and likes and words like that. When are you going to start doing like original podcast content? And there's two answers to that. One is, I have done a lot of original podcast content. It's just basically on other people's podcasts. I've gone on to so many other people's podcasts, video channels, hybrids of the two, that I've got a very long list of guest appearances. I've also done some guest hosting, for example, for the Sunday Stoic podcast recently. And you could count the Wisdom for Life podcast as something that I do. That's the radio show that I do with Dan Hayes here in Milwaukee, running every Saturday while COVID is going on, and then we might go back to Friday times once we're out of that. So there's all of that, right? I'm on podcasts, but when it comes to shooting original podcast, or rather recording original podcast content, I'm going to do that when I reach a higher level of Patreon support. Why? Because I'm a busy guy, and creating original podcast content, that takes a lot of work and a lot of time, and I would need to divert some time from the other things I'm doing to creating that content for people. So if you want to see that, the key thing to do is to support on Patreon. I'm going to put a link to that below as well. And if you like my other stuff that I do, like videos and blog posting and the public events that I host online, worldwide, you might consider becoming a Patreon supporter as well, even if it's at just the $1 level. Give back a little bit, right, if you're getting some value out of the stuff that I do. But so podcasting, it is something that I'm looking forward eventually to getting into in a more original way. For the time being, it's going to be these Sadler's lectures, which people seem to enjoy, so I'm going to keep cranking them out, and they're really helpful resources for my philosophy students, so I kind of get a double dip that way. So, long story short, going back to the key question, hey, Dr. Sadler, why don't you turn these lectures into podcast episodes, or why don't you have a podcast? The answer is, I already have been doing that. Link is below. You can go and check it out. Hope you enjoy it.